2 carts? I asked incredulously. Yes, Moner said. We were going to have them go with the main caravan, but they don't want to leave for another 2 days. If you're willing to take them yourself, we'll happily supply you with the additional cart you'll need. And all I've got to do is take the passengers to the capital? Correct. 8 passengers total. Most are adventurers, but you will need to spring for a guard force. Adventurers? Can't I just pay them to guard the caravan? I chuckled. If you can afford them, Moner smirked. 4 of them are over 20s and the other 3 are over 5s. Yeesh. I can afford the over 5s, but even one over 20 is too rich for my blood, I said. We don't have a lot of time. What's your decision? Of course I'll do it. A free cart? I'd have to be dumb to say no. Good, Moner said with satisfaction. We'll get it attached to your current one, and your passengers will arrive soon. I nodded my understanding as the chief's aide turned and walked away. Things had gone well for me since the debacle with the giant rats. I'd made more than enough to replace my narces and patch my cart up. Now they were going to give me another cart, and all I have to do in exchange is to take some adventurers back to the capital with me. Despite not even technically being a village, Nuleva always treats me pretty well. I watched as some orcs attached the new cart to the rear of my own. They also moved the goods I'd purchased and evened them out between the carts to make room for seating. I walked over to inspect my new cart. It was well constructed. Hell, I'd wager it's worth more than my original cart is in its current condition. Buff snorted at me, smelling the yipple in my pack. I chuckled as I pulled it out, ripped it in half, and gave Buff and Regal each a piece. Telena's going to roll her eyes when she hears my new narces names, but I've never been good at naming stuff. Anyone who has any doubt of that may certainly ask Imlor Tula too. I'm glad I was able to get them for a good price, but I still felt a pang of grief at the loss of Noble and Hulk. These narces are much larger than Noble and Hulk had been, because they're bred specifically for pulling heavy loads at speed. They also have a certain aggression behind their eyes, like they're looking for an excuse to attack something. It's a tad unnerving, but it might just be my imagination. They'd been remarkably well behaved so far. Are you our driver? Someone from behind me asked. I turned to see a group of adventurers and a messenger. The messenger had been the one who spoke. I opened my mouth to respond, but surprise took my voice as I examined the other adventurers. 4 unfamiliar orcs, 2 familiar orcs, and what I now know to be a human. Oh, it's you, Nash said. Hi, Imlor, how have you been? Nick asked with a smile. I've been good, I managed to say. I'm surprised to see you here. You're the adventurers that I'm taking to the capital? Yes, Yulk interjected. We've been summoned by the High Chief himself. Are we ready to go? The messenger asked with annoyance at being ignored. Not yet, I've got to hire some guards. I'm available, one of the largest orcs I've ever seen said with a grin. 3 of the other adventurers looked at him with exasperated expressions. I remembered what Moner had said and realized that these were the over 20s. The mountainous one notwithstanding, the other 3 didn't look particularly different from normal adventurers. One was a spellcaster, another was obviously a blade expert, and the third had the unassuming posture of a skilled rogue. If you're one of the over 20s, I'm afraid I can't afford your services, I replied gently. Ah, hell, you're doing me a favor by taking me to my payday, he said with a laugh. I'll give you a discount. How's 50 copper sound? We could use the money too, Nash added. 50 copper for myself and my 2 brothers as well. Nick looked at Nash with confusion. My sword's broken, and isn't your axe chipped? Nash looked back at him and replied, My axe still has plenty of teeth, and you've still got your spells. We'll be able to handle just about anything we run into on the road. 2 silver isn't bad for guards. I'd been expecting to pay at least 5. Plus, I've seen the Alta brothers in action. There's no doubt that they're capable of guarding the caravan. Deal, I said before they could change their minds. Well, that settles that. We're ready to get on our way. Hop aboard. I excitedly climbed into the coach box and grabbed the reins. The narces shifted slightly as the adventurers and messenger took their seats. I watched until they were settled, and then urged Buff and Regal to start pulling. The nurses began to pull the two carts effortlessly. I'd been a little worried whether or not they could handle it, but my fears were unfounded. Once I was certain they were following the trail without guidance, I turned back to my passengers for some chit-chat. After learning everyone's names, I asked what was really on my mind. "So, why does the High Chief want to see you?" I asked. "He wants to meet Nick, and we're probably getting dragged along due to association," Nash answered. I couldn't tell if he was upset about that or not. Nash has an odd bit of stoicism, it seems. "Did you make out okay?" Nick asked. "Were you able to still make a profit off the stuff we saved?" "Yes, and thanks again for the timely rescue. I was able to fulfill the most profitable of my orders and get my cart all patched up. I even got new nurses," I answered excitedly. "Meet Buff and Regal." "Nice to meet you," Nick said with a smile. The nurses ignored him and continued striding ever forward. I chuckled at their lack of reaction. "What happened to your sword anyway?" I asked. "It broke. A boss in the dungeon cut right through it." "Ah, a pity. So you're in the market for a new one then?" "No, I'm going to try to have it repaired." "Ah," I winced. "Is it enchanted?" "No, why?" "Well, it's usually cheaper to replace a broken blade than it is to fix it. I learned that from my son," I laughed. "You have kids?" Nash asked. "Yep, 2 sons and a daughter. The eldest is a level 3 adventurer already." I beamed. "I'm hoping one of my other children will opt to take over the family business, though." "Why not hire your son as a guard?" "Guard duty is boring, apparently. It also doesn't pay well until you're over level 5, I explained. I'd obviously pay him more than a normal guard, but the lack of entertainment is a big issue for my boy. He prefers the adventuring part of being an adventurer. Your clan's bond could be stronger then. I would work on that with your other children." The criticism stung, but I knew it wasn't coming from a malicious place. Nash seems like the honorable sort, and giving harsh advice is one of their greatest displays of kindness. He's not wrong either. Imlor II and I are civil, but we don't see each other nearly as often as I'd like. I tell myself that it's just because we're busy with work, but the truth is I wasn't exactly a great father, and the end result of that is a wedge between us. A tale as old as time. Business always came first. I know it's wrong, but it was ever so easy to justify at the time. I'd considered myself a good dad because I never hit my family, and they never went hungry. Unfortunately, I didn't realize until my son had grown from a boy to a man that that's the bare minimum of fatherhood. I'd missed out on his growth and didn't make myself available to help mold him. He'd grown into a stranger to me, and I'd let it happen. Now the consequences tear through me like a knife. It's mostly small things, like how he sends letters addressed to his mother instead of to me, or how he'll go see his friends in town before coming home after an adventure. I'd already resolved to do better by my other children, but it hurt that Nash had been able to see the truth of our relationship after such a brief discussion. "That's not an appropriate critique, brother," Yulk interjected. "Do we need to work on your social graces again?" No, I'll do better, I swear." Nash held up his hands in mock horror. "Seriously, though, I was out of line, Imlor. I apologize." "I appreciate the apology, but you're right," I sighed. "Business has always kept me away from my family, but even when I was home, I didn't exactly make time for the boy." "My father would play games with us," Yisith added. "Mine would spar with me until we couldn't move anymore," Thunra said with a nod. "Mine had to work a lot, but made time to take us on vacations whenever he could. Mostly local, but it was still fun," Nick said sadly. Everyone fell silent at the soft grief in Nick's voice. It hadn't really occurred to me that the human had family back in his world. It reminded me of when I was stuck in the tree, wishing desperately to see my family once again. A terrible feeling indeed. Nash put his hand on Nick's shoulder. "Our dad used to do the same thing before he died," Nash said. "I don't know if most people would count monster hunting trips as vacations," Yulk added with a chuckle. "And I'm certain that Nick doesn't." "Well, it got us out of the house and strengthened our bond, did it not?" Nash asked irritably. "How did he pass, if you don't mind me asking?" I interrupted. Yulk and Nash looked at each other for a moment and shrugged. "He was poisoned by an enemy of our family," Yulk explained casually. "Heartbane, nothing could be done. Thing could be—" "Yep. And then Mom hunted the poisoner down and carved him into little pieces in front of everyone," Nash said. We wanted to come with, but she made us stay home. Didn't want us to see that, but we heard about what happened from a city guard years later." Nick's expression had gone from sad to shocked. The only face that wasn't showing surprise was Thunra's, who nodded along to the story as if it were something he'd heard before. "Don't fuck with the Alta clan," he said quietly. It was on this somber and terrifying note that I opted to turn my attention back to the road. We've been making good time, and the change from forest to desert is now within view. This was the portion of road where I had met Nick, Nash, and Yulk. I shuddered at the memory of the giant rats. "Hey, I recognize that tree," Nick said, as the tree that had been my home for a time came into view. "Wait, where's the giant rat bodies?" "Eaten, presumably," Yulk answered. "There are a lot of predators in the wastes. It would be a terrible omen if a corpse were to last longer than a day." "Why's that?" Nick asked. "It would mean that an apex predator is nearby. Grim, but accurate. There isn't much that is natural about the wastes, but even monsters follow the pecking order. Anything that can be killed without too much of a fight is prey, regardless of what that prey eats in turn. There are some predators who are simply too fast or too strong to be considered prey by anything else, and these apex predators are notoriously difficult to kill." "Well, it's a good thing that I don't see any signs of our fight then," Nick said. "So the wastes, they were caused by the Cataclysm War, right?" "Wars? There were more than one," Joni said, perking up for the first time since he got on the cart. 5 total, and 3 of them were fought simultaneously." "Oh, okay. Who was fighting?" "Everyone. These cataclysmic conflicts were aptly named. The world nearly ended." "He doesn't just mean all life on the planet either. The magics involved threatened to break our world on multiple occasions," Yulk added. "It got so bad that not much is actually known about the conflicts themselves because hardly anyone survived to write their histories." "That's right," Joni nodded sadly. "There's an account carved in stone in the dwarven kingdom of Prignera on the southern continent, but it's unknown if the account is accurate because there's no way to verify it." "Ain't Prignera one of them bunker countries, where the whole thing is pretty much underground?" Thunra asked, to which Joni nodded again. "Wait, okay, so hold on. You don't know what started the fighting?" Nick interrupted. "Not for certain," Joni answered. "However, the account in Prignera says that demons conspired to convince all the countries of Mer to attack each other, and once that war was nearly finished, the forces of Hell invaded our plane of existence. These were the first 2 Cataclysm Wars." "Wait, Hell exists here?" Nick incredulously asked. "Again, we don't know for certain. A lot of scholars believe that demons are a convenient scapegoat created to cover up the magical experimentation that went on during these conflicts," Joni explained. "The demons won the Second Cataclysm War, according to the account, but their victory was short-lived. The Third Cataclysm War began when the Anyels from the Plane of Haven invaded, supposedly to restore order and free the Mer from the tyranny of the demons. They managed to take half of every continent, but were fought to a standstill." "What about the 4th and 5th? Didn't they happen at the same time as the 3rd? "Yes. The Anyels ruled over their Mer with just as much tyranny as the demons did. Less slavery and butchery, but even the pettiest of crimes were met with extremely harsh punishments. This was the order that they so craved, but mortals require a balance of order and chaos to happily live our lives. The demons saw this and made a fatal mistake," Joni said. "They convinced some of the Mer who were living under the Anyels to rebel. Once they did, the demons went on the offensive. However, the sight of mortals fighting against the Anyels inspired those who were subjugated by the demons to rebel as well. The war between the Anyels and the Mer was the 4th Cataclysm War, and the war between the demons and the Mer was the 5th. Demons fighting Anyels, Mer fighting demons, and Mer fighting Anyels. Everything natural in this world rose up against the 2 occupying armies and fought them back to their own planes. Never to be seen or heard from again," Thunra finished with a laugh. "I don't know how much stock I put in tales like that. Think I'm of the belief that powerful mages were fucking with forces they don't understand, and opted to cover it up once the dust settled." "That is the more plausible explanation, but there's technically less evidence of that," Joni countered. "Lack of evidence is usually evidence of a cover-up," Thunra said. Spoken like a city guard. You ever think about a career change? Yulk grinned. 3 hots and a cot don't sound so bad, but my PA would have my balls if I even tried. Everyone laughed as we continued our journey. Come on, kiddo, you gotta keep your guard up, Thunra shouted. What does that even mean? I asked in frustration as I got off the ground. I felt a bit of drool drip down my chin. I wiped at it, and my hand came back bloody. A slight sting told me that Thunra had split my lip. Angry, I once again put my fists up. All right, see, your hands are too close together. You gotta be able to see all of me, Thunra explained. Also, you don't really gotta be making fists. You're supposed to be stopping me from hitting you, not trying to hit me. This is how boxers do it, though, I countered. I don't know what that is, Thunra laughed. But it ain't working for you. I opened my hands and spread them apart until I could see all of Thunra. He grinned and rushed at me. I immediately activated time dilation, but it hardly seemed to slow the gigantic orc down. He swung his massive fist, and I was able to barely redirect the punch so that it sailed past my head. I clenched my left hand and sent it at Thunra's face as I felt something hit me in the gut. Time dilation deactivated, and I went flying back. I slammed into the ground and rolled, gasping for air and getting a mouthful of dirt for my troubles. You managed to block a punch, that's great! Good job, Nick, Thunra shouted with glee as I sputtered. Yeah, great, I managed to say once I could breathe again. I spit the rest of the dirt out of my mouth and rose to my feet again. My legs, however, had other plans and gave out on me. I sighed as I pushed myself back up. You all right? Thunra asked. My legs are wobbly. You got me pretty hard, I answered. Oh, damn. Sorry about that. I'll dial it back a bit. I was going at 75, but I think I overshot your abilities a bit. I'll drop to 50%. It is difficult to describe the wave of emotions that washed over me upon learning that the giant orc brawler had already been holding back. Anger at myself for not being able to keep up, happiness that he's going to be holding back even more, and shock at how much power the bastard actually has. I suggest a short break while I repair your spleen, Ten said. My spleen? Yes, that last impact slightly ruptured it. I've got it under control, but it will be easier if you to lay down for a few minutes. As logic overrode adrenaline, the pain where Thunra had hit me got worse. A lot worse. It radiated from my upper left torso, just behind the bottom ribs. It felt like my stomach was on fire and my body was trying to blow out that fire with a needle tornado. I held up one hand and laid on the ground. The pain slowly began to ebb as Thunra walked over to me with a curious expression. I need a minute. Apparently you ruptured my spleen, I said as casually as I could. Oh, shit, Thunra said. You gonna be okay? Do we need to call Yulk? Unnecessary. Healing magic will interfere. Ten's got this. Just need a few minutes is all. Thunra walked over and sat next to me while Ten repaired the injury. So, what's a spleen anyways? He asked. I'm not 100% sure. Think it has something to do with filtering blood like the liver, I answered. The spleen controls the level of white blood cells, red blood cells, and blood platelets contained within your blood. It also screens the blood and removes any old or damaged red blood cells, Ten explained. Ah, never mind. Ten explained it. It filters the blood and controls the levels of white and red blood cells, I said. Handy little thing, Thunra chuckled. I'm guessing that's not a vital organ, right? The skill I used is supposed to incapacitate, not kill. Humans can live without a spleen, but a ruptured spleen causes internal bleeding that can become fatal within 24 to 48 hours. Ten says it's not a vital organ, but a ruptured one bleeds inside you and can be fatal after a day or two if it isn't fixed, I answered. All right, that makes sense, Thunra sighed in relief. If you walk around with that much pain for 2 days, you're kinda asking for it, you know? I lay there silently, letting Ten do its thing. I found it kind of interesting that Thunra's skill was supposed to incapacitate me, but could have ended up killing me in the long run. If you looked at it in terms of black and white, the skill failed. However, a ruptured organ would definitely incapacitate most people, and a ruptured spleen isn't fatal if you get it treated. So in a way, the skill did exactly what it was supposed to do. I guess skills aren't perfect, and it's probably important to keep that in mind. Don't want to accidentally cause someone's death when I'm just trying to get them to stop fighting. Even though I hadn't learned a skill from our sparring yet, Thunra had still taught me a lesson. Spleen repaired, you're good to go, Ten said. I enjoyed laying down for a few seconds before sitting up. All right, I'm ready. Good, Thunra said, helping me up. We'll try again, but this time I want you to focus on evading my strikes. I'm going to hit you with a flurry unless you stop me. I nodded resolutely. A flurry involves a lot of punches happening very quickly. Definitely don't want to get hit with that. I took my stance, and Thunra charged. He swung with his right fist, and I activated time dilation again. I pushed his right fist upward with my left hand and elbowed his left fist away from me. His hands quickly tucked back into him and came at me again, but I kept deflecting them. Right, left, both left, right. Time dilation wore off, but I was still managing to keep up with his strikes. Barely. Then his left fist did something weird. It seemed to be in 3 places at once. I blocked one of the strikes, but the 2 others were going to hit me. Preternatural evasion unlocked. My foot pushed off of the ground on its own, and my body twisted out of the way of the other 2 strikes, and even managed to avoid a surprise right-handed attack. I moved faster than I thought that I could, and Thunra noticed the change in speed. He held up his hands and grinned. Whoa, okay, let's stop, he said. Was that a new skill? Yeah, I said, once again out of breath. Preternatural evasion. Oh, the dodge one, congratulations. Thanks. I concentrated on the skill's name, and the box popped up. Preternatural evasion allows a user to automatically dodge for 1 minute. Cooldown, 10 minutes. Automatically dodge? I asked. Yeah, you move on your own, Thunra answered. Well, not that you don't already move on your own. I guess you could say. I zoned out as Thunra struggled to explain the concept of automatic movement. Preternatural evasion seems like a very useful skill, but the 10-minute cooldown could be an issue. Maybe if I level it up, the cooldown will decrease. Hey, Ten, you level a skill up by using it right? I asked. For the most part, certain skills require milestones to be met before they will level up, regardless of whether or not the skill is utilized. These milestones are generally able to be met quicker by using the skills, though. Other skills require a deeper understanding of the nature of the skill to level up, which usually occurs naturally while using the skill, Ten explained. It's exceedingly rare for a skill that can level up not to do so as you use it. I understand. So what does Preternatural Evasion 2 look like? Does the cooldown decrease at all? Well, I can't tell you. Something is stopping me. What? What's stopping you? I do not know. I can tell you all about your current skills, but I can't give you details about ones you don't have, Ten said. Do you want to know more about Preternatural Evasion I? No, I got it. Well, that's concerning and annoying. I don't even know if leveling up Preternatural Evasion is going to be worth it or not, and now I've got to worry about whatever's keeping Ten from telling me stuff about skills. It's probably the Kuraguard or whatever, but I wonder what else Ten can't tell me. Like one of them machines, you know? Thunra asked, clearly looking for an answer. Yeah, sure, I replied. You ready to go again? Thought you'd never ask, he said with a grin. As we took our stances, it occurred to me that I didn't know how much time was left on the cooldown for Preternatural Evasion. A right hook to the face quickly let me know that it hadn't finished cooling down quite yet. Thankfully, Yasith interrupted our sparring match before any more punches could be thrown. Time to head out, she said. Thunra complained a bit, but we ended up loading up onto the wagons and continuing on our way, ending my first bout of training. We didn't train on the first day of our journey because we had left in the afternoon and didn't stop until it was dusk. Well, except for bathroom breaks. I went over the results of my training in my head as we drove on. 10, is there a way to see the cooldowns for my skills? I asked. Yes, you don't currently have any on cooldown, but when you do, you'll see it in the upper right corner of your vision, 10 said. I set the opacity to 25% so that it doesn't impede your vision. Thanks. We continued on until dusk, stopped, rested, woke up, had breakfast, and got back on the road once again. Most of the discussions were how to best season certain meats that I'd never heard of. with Imlor chiming in when a spice that also paired well with vegetables was mentioned. I was too busy dreading my training with Nash to participate in the conversation much. My dread grew worse and worse as the sun rose higher and higher into the sky. Finally, the cart stopped, and Nash was the first to jump out. "My turn," he said while grabbing 2 wooden swords. "You'll be on a fence today." My spirits rose at this, and I happily caught the sword he tossed at me. It shouldn't hurt so bad if I'm the one doing the swinging, right? We walked a short distance away from everyone else and took our stances. "Begin," he said. I immediately charged at him with an underhand swing to try to throw him off balance. I glanced at the ground to be sure of my footing, and my vision went dark. I shook my head in confusion, and as my sight came back, I found myself with a very familiar view. I watched a cloud drift by for a moment, then got up. "The hell happened?" I asked Ten. "He leapt forward and kicked you in the forehead. You're fine, though." I looked up at Nash and was greeted by an awfully smug expression. "Keep your eyes on your opponent," he condescendingly said. "Try again." This time I tried for a horizontal strike and activated time dilation. Nash must have seen this coming, because the blunted point of his blade was exactly where my forehead had to be to complete my strike. If I had used dash, I'd have been knocked out. I silently cursed to myself and managed to barely avoid the counterattack, backing off in the process. A timer that said time dilation appeared and began counting down from 5 minutes. "Good, you're not quite as bad as you used to be," Nash laughed. "Try again." "Shit," I said, staring at the timer. I took a deep breath and decided on my course of action. I ran toward Nash and activated Slide Slash. He leapt backward and I threw my sword at his face and used dash to get closer. I balled up my fist and prepared to activate Breathtaker Strike, but Nash spun around quickly, turning his back to prevent the skill from activating. I brought up my left hand to block the elbow that he threw at my face, but couldn't stop the force he put behind it. My hand smashed into my face and I slammed into the ground. "Cloud watching again?" Ten asked. Not helpful. My bones seemed to creak as I once again got off the ground. The wooden sword I had thrown at Nash landed at my feet. "You shouldn't throw your weapon unless you have another one handy," Nash said. "Your fists don't count quite yet, by the way." "Then why did you avoid them?" I asked sarcastically. "Because I can, and that's my point. What good is a weapon that can't hit its target? I mean, it would hit most targets. The only reason it didn't hit you is because you were expecting it," I pointed out. "The reason I can't land a hit is because you have more experience than I do, and you know my fighting style. It's not fair." Nash's laughter interrupted me. "Why would that matter?" he asked sardonically. "It's not as if I'd be doing you any favors by letting you hit me. You grow as you figure out how to hit me, and of course it isn't fair. This isn't some rich nobleman's tournament. We're training to make sure you don't die when faced with monsters. Or would you rather have 10 do all the work?" I inwardly cringed. Nash had hit a nerve with the 10 comment, and I was immediately embarrassed by my misconceptions. "No, I don't want 10 to do any of the work," I answered. "I don't want to be like that thing." Nash's attitude changed. His smugness evaporated, and he suddenly became concerned. "Did 10 say something about that?" he asked. "No, just an assumption on my part," I replied. "Intuition, I suppose." "The man in the dungeon did have an AI, but it was in standby mode when we fought," Ten said. "How do you know?" "It didn't respond to any of my attempts at communication." What if it didn't want to talk? Or couldn't? That hadn't occurred to me. I suppose it is a possibility. I opted to keep that to myself as Nash sighed. "Listen, Nick, do you know what the most important thing to do in a fight is?" "Protect others?" I asked. Right." He scratched the back of his neck. "I was actually going to say survive. I guess it's kind of complicated, but if you've got the option to survive and to help others survive, you should take a hold of that option with both hands. So if it comes to that, don't hesitate to rely on 10. In every other situation, though, you should be fighting with your own 2 hands." "All right, I understand," I said. I do kind of understand where Nash is coming from, but something feels wrong about using 10 to fight. My dad always used to say that the easy road has hidden pitfalls. I might be biased, because I don't like the idea of something else controlling my body, but I can't seem to shake the feeling that there's some sort of cost to 10 taking over. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. That's enough stalling, Nash said with a grin. Try again.